A lot of what happened in the forum is still happens to a degree in programs that I participate in is to let people get in touch with how useful this being frightened was. When I was a child, can I understand a 7-year old or a 3-year old having that kind of response? And I have the compassion to see how legitimate it was. But do I need to have that response to a situation now that I'm whatever age I am? And well, it might trigger something for me. I don't know that I need to respond in the way in which I than then responded then. A more novel and adequate response to the whole situation. Yes, and ultimately I really think it's possible to get to the place where you're so related to what's out. Sorry, I'm going to use some jargon. You're so related to what's out here that what's going on in the aspects of myself that I don't have any choice about what reduces the impact of what's going on in those aspects of myself. That I don't have anything to do with that or with it. So I want to make sure that we bring some questions down. Great. Well, we're still yakking. Anybody have some for me? Great. Thank you. So before we get to some of it, we'll, all right, we're going to be here for a while. We obviously, I apologize in advance, can't do can't do all of them, but we'll do a lot. One other thing that occurred to me when I was thinking about this afternoon, because I don't want to talk about asked, and I no, don't even talk about us, is some of the other projects, the Hunger Project. And it seems to me you got a lot of, yeah, I don't know, people made fun of the Hunger Project, the scale of it. And yet it strikes me in the 21st century, we have entrepreneurs who are doing very expensive projects. It's more fashionable now. More so, we don't laugh when Bill Gates says he wants to eliminate parasitic diseases. You don't laugh when Elon Musk says wants to go to Mars before anybody else. But I think in the 40 years ago, 30 years ago, people weren't thinking in those kind of scale. So often you did talk about the Hunger Project, and I never talked to you. And I think about John Denver. What did losing is a two-part question. Hunger Project and what did losing John Denver mean to you? John was truly a decent human being. I mean, down to his toes, like all of us. I'm sure he had failings, but I just never, ever, ever, and I spent time with John, never saw him act in any way other than as a decent human being, was obviously a great musician. I mean, that doesn't need me to say anything about that part. And John really did not, in terms of what it would look like, but in terms of what it would mean to him, want to make a difference in addition to his musical talent. in his career. And Jerry Weintraub, who was John's manager for a very long time, and also a decent human being, but a totally different character than John. Jerry actually always understood that that was important to John, and Jerry was always supportive of John, and that wasn't any, and that wasn't any there. Wasn't any. There was no value in it for Jerry, and that part of John's life. So, at any rate, as I can tell, as you can tell, I have an enormous respect for John. And I was in him for losing him. No, I didn't feel like I ever really lost him. No, no, no. I want to talk about that for a second because it's, you know, at my age, there's a lot of people passing away and people, that I care about profoundly. But I want to tell you, I want to talk about two things. I had a friend who, when she got pregnant, she had a miscarriage. And this was a woman who being a mother was what it was all about. And I don't know, at any rate, it was a crushing experience for her. And I remember talking to her, was over the phone, but I remember talking to her about sadness. And I realized something in that conversation with her, that we really have two kinds of sadness. There's something we really like about sadness. There's a certain kind of sadness we really love. We actually will pay for it when we go to the theater or go to the movies. And the more sad it is, the better. The more lively we feel. It's very good. That's exactly what makes you feel alive. That's exactly what I was going to say. It is a fundamental human expression. And so it's an opportunity to express your humanity. And it's also what heals loss. As she and I discussed, it's like you get a cut across your belly and something reminds you of your loss. And if you can experience the loss with that kind of authentic sadness, that poignant kind of sadness, some of that cut starts to be healed. Then something to remind you later, and the sadness will disappear. And to get busy with something, and then it'll come back. Then there's the other kind of sadness, which is kind of, well, as I would say, it is unquestionably a reactivation of earlier losses. And that's the kind of sadness that doesn't heal anything. And it isn't a human expression. So I believe you. And now, to get back to John, I don't know. I'm as happy about things that John created in his life, the kind of contribution he made to the quality of people's lives, the partner he was in the Hunger Project, and in a couple of other endeavors is as real for me. And that's what I celebrate when I think about John. Very good. And I was thinking the two kinds of sadness. The first kind is the scar The second kind is the open sore. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The first kind is it reminds me of whatever Aristotle had to say about catharsis. It is this one of the reasons we do expect to experience sadness in the theater, because it is an association. But on the other hand, it is also an opportunity to do some healing. If it's great work of art, if it's just, yeah, crapping on the floor, it's not so great. Yeah, as he might say, so I'm going to read you the first creation, and I'm afraid I'm going to have some more in between. But what would you say to those that are now leading the programs from seminars touched by you that are still impacting people to this day? Would you say to the people who are now, is it real simple for me? It's applause and thank you for what you're doing. And I'm in touch with some of those people, a very small minority of people who lead seminars for Landmark. But, I just have a real respect for people willing to take on what's required to get themselves trained to the point where they can lead seminars effectively and make a difference in the lives of people who participate in their seminars. And I can say all that in just one word, namely applause. It is hard, though, to accept being the person who's following one of the guys who started something. Yeah, I mean, one of my friends in graduate school hit the front is piece of the dissertation was, if I had failed in this dissertation, it would be because giants are standing on my shoulders. Well, here's one thing. Here's the thing, Jonathan. You were a part of this. So you'll know there's a woman who was considering doing some sort of a history with me, and she just couldn't believe that I was uninterested in who I was. I was interested in the nature of the ideas and the and so my relationship with people who in Landmark, for example, who offered the forum, and the seminar leaders who offer programs as assistants for people who've been through the forum. I have no sense of their having a connection to me. I have a sense that they have a connection to the possibility that the ideas make available. Good. So I'm going to say a couple names. Yes, Buckminster Fuller. Oh, yeah, we know Bucky. I have to tell you about Bucky. So, Bucky's grandson had participated in some of the programs, and he and I became acquaintances. And he said, I'd like to introduce you to my grandfather, Buckminster Fuller." And I said, "Oh, great. I'd love to meet Bucky." I wasn't trying to be familiar. Everybody knew Bucky as Bucky. But at any rate, Bucky paid me one of the greatest compliments I've ever been paid. What he said, "Well, I had lunch with my grandson and I decided he was all right because my toes didn't curl during lunch." Bucky was really special. He really was quite an extraordinary guy, and I love the thing he said when he had when he had really crashed and burned, and his the people who invested in his project that he was doing lost all their money, and he was so broke that he had to send and his wife and his daughter to live with their parents. And he was standing by a reservoir thinking about throwing himself in. And he said, and I don't want to get this, and I won't get this quite right. I'll get what he said right, but he said that he suddenly realized that what he could do was to devote the rest of his life to contributing to the average person's life. And that's the way he played it. And he was really good at it. Warren Bennis. What kind of scholar was Warren Bennis? Father of leadership studies. I don't know what RIA scholar means. What's RIA scholar? A RIA scholar is a restrictive early action. Huh. We saw in the film, yes, he passed away, last year. And Warren was always, this is 2015, Warren was always just really great with me. And he had a heart attack, and he was living with another great name in London, outside of London, and one of the Queen's castles, and in an apartment in one of the Queen's castles. And somebody told him he needed to do the training. I don't remember who it was, but somebody told him, and he did do it. And then after, he looked me up, and he and I became buddies. He moved to San Francisco for a while, and when he and I spent some time together, and he did a lot of community consulting. But I want to tell you about my first encounter with him. My first encounter with him was in a setup very much like this. It was bleachers in the St. Francis Hotel. And it was the first talk I ever did using the principles in business. And I can remember to the day that right there is where Warren stood, and I'm going on and blah, 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 whatever I'm saying. And Warren stands up. This guy stands up and says, "Stop, stop, stop." So I out loud, and so I looked up and I said, "Yeah, what's the problem?" Assuming that he was going to argue with something he said. "Don't go so fast." He said, "Don't go so fast. I'm trying to assimilate the ideas." And afterwards, he came down. Let's see if the St. Francis Hotel is still. The Westin, St. Francis. Oh, this is Union Square. No, San Francisco. There you go. That's where he and I met, and Warren was just really great with me. It was very, 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 very generous. He and I read some rather long, maybe not great papers that I had written, and he was just good about it. And I'm sure that, hundreds of people or maybe thousands of people sent him documents that he had to read. And he was just, I mean, it was really great with me and my wife. And I just had breakfast with his widow, Grace, when we got fond over the time that we would go visit Warren. And Grace in California, a very popular professor at USC, University of Southern California. Oh, yes, my good had lunch with him. Often he probably the most noteworthy leadership guru. I don't remember how many enormous number of books that he wrote on leadership. Warren and Grace in California. A very popular professor. I'm going to ask you a self indulgent question about one person, one name, Fritz Perls. Oh, yes. Well, those of you who don't know, some of you do know Fritz Perls was the, how should we say, hippie guru psychiatrist? Yes, Esalen in the 60s. That's right. And that's where, I'm exactly right. That's where I met Fritz. I was in a couple of classes that he did. And, he was, again, one of those guys who talks straight. And I did my thing, and you do your thing. Yes. And if we meet each other, it's beautiful. If not, it can't be helped. Yes. And the thing is, the thing with him was that when you interacted with him, he got you to the place where you were being straight about whatever it was that you were talking about. No, and I kind of like Fritz. He was my kind of guy. So, what are the questions you asked yourself to generate yourself and decide what to work on now? Yeah, that's easy for me because I've always looked at where things weren't going so well. So, one of the places where I've spent a lot of time looking in last maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years is, but what the hell are you doing? And the first thing I realized, because I want to, yeah, I want what I use my life for at the moment is completing the work that I am in the midst of, so that I can leave behind for somebody else to take apart and move or use or take to the next level. And one of the first things I realized was that I actually don't figure things out. I trained myself over the years to put aside what I know or think or believe and just I'm I'm going to use a couple different words to look rather than just figure out, rather than try to understand, rather than try to, yeah, and I don't like and say that any better rather than to try to figure it out, rather than try to know something, rather than figure out, no, yet I think about, no, I don't want to do any of those things. I just want to look. And then what I mean by look is I want to be with something. with nothing between me and what I'm being with, so that I can get a sense of what's actually going on there. And so that's a part of what I've done to develop myself, is to look rather than figure out, or to be with something so that I can see into it and see what's available there. All right, we'll continue. Peace and love. Bye bye. Later.